You ready?
Okay, yeah, let's kick things off. So good, beautiful afternoon, everyone. It's hard to believe this time last week it was 2 degrees. I hope we're on our way to spring. Thank you for joining us for this workshop, Introduction to Energy Management Part 1, presented by Great Plains Center of Excellence and facilitated by our Director of Workforce Development, Dr. Frankie Wood-Black. Dr. Wood-Black is an instructor at Northern Oklahoma College and principal of Sophic Pursuits, Inc. She's the division chair in engineering, physical science, and process technology for Northern Oklahoma College. Her division supports the pre-engineering and technology students that will be entering Oklahoma's energy workforce. Prior to coming to NOC, she worked in the petroleum and chemical industry for over 25 years in technical management, laboratory operations, environmental science and compliance, sustainability, and professional development. She served as a senior air professional for an environmental consulting firm focusing on environmental air compliance for refining and natural gas operations. She's a member of the American Chemical Society, the American Cheese Society, American Physical Society, Physics Teachers Association, AAAS, and the American Side Saddle Association. She is an American Chemical Society and AAS Fellow. And Frankie, with that, I will let you take over.
Well, thank you for that great introduction, Kim. So I'm glad you all joined us for our first in a series of webinars on energy management. So I'm going to kind of go through what we've got planned for you today and what we have planned over the next couple of months. So this is module 1. We're going to do a quick welcome and introduction just to remind folks who the Great Plains Center of Excellence is and the Industrial Assessment Center, Training and Assessment Center. Today, we're going to cover the definition of energy management so that we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about the goals of energy management, the scope, and this is both the scope of your energy management plan and the scope of the businesses that we also look at. And then talk a little bit about the benefits of that energy management. Then next month, we're going to dive a little deeper and we're going to look at key elements of a successful energy management plan, those things that kind of are scalable depending upon the size of the business that we're looking at or the size of the institution, and then discuss a little bit about energy management frameworks. And that's targeted for the end of March, and we'll do another hour webinar there. And then we've got one coming up in the end of April that will allow us to do a little bit of the continuous improvement. While we all know that it's plan, act, do, revise, and that normal circle of things as we try to work with these programs, we want to go ahead and look at continuous improvement, how one might monitor some of those effective practices that are going on for various things. And then looking at some of those effective, those practices that seem to work for some places and some recommendations and things that can move on. So that's the plan over the course of the next 3 months. But today we're just starting with that initial introduction of what is energy management, what are the benefits, and how we're going to look at that. But first, we want to kind of give you a little reminder as to who the Great Plains Center of Excellence is. We service this entire region, and we're one of the 5 key regional hubs for the industrial and training assessment centers. And we are working with the Program Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains. So we do have a lot of information that's there, and you can go to our website to look at that a little bit more. But what we actually do is we do have a video that if you want to dive into that. But we have a core team. We're led by Dr. Bora, who's our principal investigator. And then as you met Kimberly, who started it off, she's our program coordinator. Jessica Stewart works with our partnership development. Heba works with workforce development and looking at lead building type activities. And then Kyle is our program manager, and he's the one that coordinates some of the things we'll be telling you about should you all decide that, yes, you want to do an assessment and how that might work. So what is our industrial assessment centers? we're here to provide best practices in workforce development and supporting industries to help them reduce their costs associated with their energy programs at their facilities. So we are there, we have broad impacts, we can put people in touch with training. So we're really a good resource center to allow for folks to get information, work with others, and help improve their overall business. So we're really in the idea business. We help do assessments. We provide resources. We provide an unbiased opinion. So if you're in the process of trying to look at how you might go out and benefit by installing certain things, we can actually sit there and talk about, well, what kinds of options and opportunities are available. And we help with coordination of getting you in contact with those that may have funds to allow you to implement some of these practices. So our goal is to get some of these various things that we find and help you with to get 50% of them implemented, whether some of those are really low-hanging fruit, easy things to do, and others may be a little more difficult or more complex, where you may have to be writing grants or applications for loans to do capital equipment. So that's what we are here for. So we do have a variety of resources available. We help with audits. And again, Kyle is our person that would coordinate, but you can always email me and I can get you into contact with Kyle. We can provide case studies. We work with students, and here at Oklahoma State, we also deal with a variety of research activities. We help communities get together. As people heard as we first came on, we've got different community groups that we work with, like the Oklahoma Manufacturers Association, the different communities, like here in Enid, we work with the Enid Economic Development group. So we help that, and that we can provide and put you into contact with resources. So that's who we are. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with energy management. What is it and how can we benefit? This is the what's in it for me. We're going to look at that definition of energy management. We're going to talk about the goals, and that's several fold goals at a higher level. And then why is it important? These are, how can I benefit from an energy management program? So first, when we're dealing with management, we all know that we go in and there's usually a place where you're planning or you're looking at your systems, then you're trying to optimize, you try a few things, you monitor to see how it goes, and then the cycle starts all over again. The objective of energy management is to do two things. One is to reduce costs in terms of how much our energy costs are associated, and I'll show you some numbers as energy is a big cost. And the other part is being able to optimize your resources. So while we know expansion may increase our energy costs, we want to expand well, and we want to move and be able to do that. So for our purposes, energy management is going to be defined as the process of planning, optimizing, and monitoring energy use to reduce costs. It involves the planning of energy production and consumption. So depending upon your particular industry or your particular situation, where you get your energy, how that energy is utilized within your plant. Are you going to, do you have, for example, if I'm a refinery, do I have cogeneration? Am I making my own energy, or am I purchasing my energy off of the grid or from some other entity? We're going to analyze the data to identify areas for improvement. We're going to look at strategies to reduce energy consumption, and we want to track our progress over time. So that's really what we're looking at when we talk about energy management. It's the whole picture. It's that everything from the time that we're purchasing that energy to do whatever tasks that we need to do. And if I'm at a commercial building, that purchase of energy may be only for keeping my employees comfortable and running my computer systems, to the point that I may be a big industry at the end of the chain where I'm making my own energy. I've got a cogeneration plant, or I have generators that I'm at my facility that I'm utilizing in order to manufacture something. I also have those transportation costs. So there's a lot of places where energy comes into play. Now, one of the interesting things when you think about energy management, this isn't a fad. This isn't a business fad where we've all talked about, well, you can look at total quality maintenance, you can look at Six Sigma, you can look at various quality type programs that we've implemented over time. Some have worked for some companies, some work really well for other companies, some don't necessarily apply. But when we get to energy management, we know that we've got a big cost to our companies and our institutions and our industries associated with energy. And that management of the energy is going to have a permanent place in our business. So this isn't a fad. This is something that's continuous. And most of us have learned from experience that if we've had a change in our business and we're no longer focusing on energy, guess what happens? We start to see our electric bill go up, or we start to see other stresses in our systems that we want to look at. So it is a significant cost and portion. So again, we're looking at the planning, monitoring, and optimizing energy use to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and then there's also the enhancement of the environmental responsibility. So there's also some really good goodwill that may be present. So it's going to set up, as we do this and we implement an energy management plan, we're probably going to set up a plan. We're going to have something that our businesses are going to look at. We have to have someone that has responsibility for that particular plan. We're going to maintain records and we're going to monitor records. We can identify outside assistance and have people that are helping with us. And then we might manage conservation projects or implement optimization projects over time. So we have a plan to put things in place, and we know that those things are looking. So why do we want to do energy management? And as I mentioned, other management fads have come and gone, but the need to manage energy is permanent. So there's going to be a direct economic return to the business, because if I can reduce my energy costs, I can manage my energy so that I am not necessarily having to pay peak rates. That's one of those interesting issues. If we know what kinds of operations we have, we may be able to time those operations so we can negotiate with our energy providers so that we're not paying those peak costs. We can get that reduction in energy costs, or that energy efficiency may provide a competitive edge to our business. And then energy security is a big deal. We saw and we have seen, and just last week, a lot of us were dealing with these kinds of issues, that our infrastructure may shut us down. We've seen that in the past. If we lose our energy coming into our plants, and how we lose that energy, if it just all of a sudden shuts down just because we've had an ice storm, we know that that's going to be a cost associated with maybe my equipment didn't come down safely. We want to look at that. And we want to prepare for future shocks. We know that life has economics, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and we want to be able to maintain and look at how our energy is used. So it's really a what's in it for me. This is one of those places that you're going to get a big bang for your buck. So the bigger picture. So just give you an idea of energy consumption on a national basis. And this data came from the current information from the Annual Energy Outlook reference case for 2023. And that's the most recent data that is available. But manufacturing accounts for, they're 75% consumer of energy. Manufacturing is 12%, but construction and agriculture also have big energy uses. Our manufacturing industries they're the biggest chunk. They're the ones that they're using a lot of those energy. So we do have those pieces that are out there. We want to be able to have an efficient use of the energy. Depending on where you're located and depending on your communities, infrastructure is a big issue. And is our infrastructure capable of handling the loads that we're asking for? If I'm building a new greenfield plant, I know that I am going to have to work with my energy provider to make sure that I have the appropriate amount of electricity, natural gas, whatever source of my energy that's coming into my plant. I need to be able to get that to my facility. If I am building in another community, I need to know that my block or my square mile is able to handle the energy load that I'm going to be putting in. We're ultimately wanting to be good neighbors, and ultimately we want to generate that goodwill, and we want to think about where are we going to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now. So that is one thing that we're looking at. Energy audits are an effective tool, looking at what energy we're using, what are our systems, what things can we do that we can get an immediate benefit. That helps. And we're looking at being able to achieve higher energy efficiency. So some cases, this may be by upgrading equipment using newer technology, using smart technology. Those are maybe areas that we want to look at in order to manage our overall energy. So let's look at the trends over time. So you can actually see, if we look at our Bureau of Labor statistics, we do have manufacturing energy that changes over time. We do get peaks and valleys. You'll see some recession times. As recessions come in, we drop off energy use, but we know that we're actually starting to see increased energy use. And that's one of the objectives, is to bring manufacturing back to our current areas. We want to know that we're going to be looking at the various things. So we've actually seen increases, and that we know that's there. So back to our energy management plan, we know it's going to give us cost reduction. We want to lower our operating expenses. And if lowering operating expenses increases profitability. Great idea. We also get some of that enhanced reputation. That's not necessarily something that people think about, but now we're seeing people buy stocks based on core values. They're core value stock groups. They're core value. You want to work with companies that match your values. So it could be improving a brand image. It could also mean attracting and retaining critical talent. This is one of those areas that especially with Generation Z, we're hearing a lot more about Generation Z they're going to go work for companies that they think respects their particular values, their particular core values. So the age of hiring that employee that was going to spend 18, 20 years, 30 years with the same company is probably not there anymore. Though the Gen Z folks need to have a reason to come back and work for the goals of your company. And that's a really interesting new twist that we haven't necessarily had before. Modernization of equipment, modernization of our things will do us a lot of different things. One is it's going to improve working conditions. 2, it's going to be more efficient. 3, we hope it improves reliability. And so we're not having to start up, shut down, and that helps us overall. And so we can actually see those increases in production. And then finally, it's a way to minimize risk. If we are dealing with things, we're going to have a reduced exposure to rising energy costs, or we have a reduced exposure to price volatility. We can diversify our energy sources that we actually use for our particular businesses. And we know that we're going to have to deal with regulations. Now, what those regulations look like now may be something different tomorrow, but we know that we will have to deal with regulations and minimize those impacts that we see. So we get those really big benefits. Now, we get those big benefits at a country level or at a state level, as well as at an individual institution or building level. So you really can dive in and actually look at that, in that all of these things add up to overall energy security, security of our infrastructure, security of being able to get those materials there. So we can really get in and dive into things. So let's just make an example. Let's look at commercial buildings. Commercial buildings are a way that you've got energy costs. We are seeing differences between pre-COVID and post-COVID, but even in a commercial building, we know we have heating and air conditioning. We know we have lighting. We know that we're impacted by our windows. We know that we're impacted by our positioning of the building. We can do passive things. If we've got a smaller smaller building, we may be able to provide shade. And that's where one of the things that HEBA works with, and looking at LEED certification and looking at those activities in our buildings, we can make our buildings more efficient. We can actually deal with those energy expenditures on a square footage basis. Food sales, how you prepare the food, how you deal with all of those, and warehouse and shipping. And warehousing is also another issue. So even with commercial buildings, we have to be considerate of those energy dollars and where we're positioning our buildings. How are we getting product from our firm, our manufacturing, to the consumer? And then we haven't even talked about the electronics infrastructure. Uses of the electric uses associated with our computers, our server systems, our security systems, all of those things come into play, and we want to look at those different aspects. So basically what we're doing in our energy management plan is we're going to start with a plan. If you're starting from ground zero, you've got to convince yourself that, yes, this is worth doing. And you've got to look at it. And that's going to entail looking at monitoring. So if I'm starting from scratch, I'm going to look at my utility bills. I'm going to look at my energy consumption. I'm going to track that information. I'm going to gather that data. And yes, data analytics is alive and well, and those data analytics really help us. We also look at what we monitor. How do we monitor? Do I need more than one? You know, I'm on it right now. I'm on a college campus. And I can tell you that several of our buildings are grouped with one meter. Well, that doesn't tell me which building I want to tackle first, because I'm not down to the building level. And so I may want to put in some more metering, or I may want to put in some more tracking. I may want to look at, how do I want to light things? We talk about lighting. Lighting's an easy one to look at because we can make changes. And I can even tell you as a homeowner that when I went from incandescent lighting to LED lighting, I was able to take my old house that was built in the 50s and with very minimal wiring was able to increase my lighting in my house because those didn't consume as much as an old incandescent lamp. So we want to control, so we want to regulate our energy usage. So that may be just policies. For example, you may want to say, hey, you know, don't plug in those little heaters into the electric, because those are big consumers of energy. Maybe you want to have people shut down equipment overnight, or looking at those peak demand hours. And, you know, are you going to get, maybe you don't want to turn all the equipment on at once. Maybe you want to stagger that equipment. And then eventually you're going to be optimizing. But again, with the ultimate goal being reducing costs, minimizing the impact, and conserving our resources. And sometimes that resources are money. We want to conserve our money. And if we reduce costs, we can reserve our money. So that really does a lot of different things. So I'm going to pause here. You can ask a question in the chat, but these are the benefits of that energy plan. So does anybody have any questions at this point that I need to address? Seeing none, we're going to look at that second part of this. So now we've got a baseline for what energy management is and where we're going to apply it and looking at that overall big picture. But now let's look at our scope. And our scope can be just a commercial building. Just a commercial building, a commercial facility. Maybe that's one building, maybe that's a warehouse, maybe that is an educational institution, maybe it's a hospital. We've got a building that is going to be an energy consumer. And that's going to have one set of energy management that we're looking for. Maybe it's going to be driven by lighting, HVAC systems, water management, what kind of water use do I use, other things that are going to be unique to your operations. For example, if I'm doing warehousing, I'm going to be looking at how often do I open and close bay doors? How often am I shifting things back and forth? Those are all going to be important parts of that business. Then I might be a small industry or a light industry or a small commercial building, not something that's big, not something, something that I'm a Coke bottling plant, or I'm a bottling plant, or I'm a canning institution, or I'm making widget A or widget B. I'm a smaller facility, I'm a smaller company that I'm looking at how I'm going to manufacture a product. And that's going to have specific energy uses and energy needs that we're going to have to look at. What kinds of equipment do I have? How is that equipment run? Are those individual things? What critical equipment do I have to have on all the time? Do I have to have 24/7 access to that particular operation? Is it an 8 to 5 operation? So all of those things are going to go into considerations for your light energy management. And then we've got the bigger picture. I'm a consolidated large industry. I may be taking something from the farm or agriculture or raw material or resource. I may be preparing an intermediate product. I may have a shipping organization that I have to pull in. So I'm transporting intermediate parts or I'm transporting areas. I've got my business or my headquarters, the office complex. I've got my folks that are doing total quality maintenance. I've got all of those things that are in there that I have to integrate. So it's a big scope. It is a really big scope. Hopefully for the folks that we're helping as part of the Great Plains Center of Excellence is we're helping the folks that are kind of on that in between the commercial buildings, the smaller businesses, the middle businesses, but we also have resources and we also have connections that can help those bigger organizations. And we're trying to pull together those case studies and that research to say, hey, does this work? Does this not work? So that scope is looking at your overall facility. So if I'm going to set up a program, so there's the one scope of what's covered under my program, excuse me. And then there is another scope of what's included in my plan or program at my company or business level. First is you've got to have the commitment. You've got to have support of your management. You've got to have somebody that says this is good for the business, because it's going to take a little bit of management time. There's going to have to be somebody responsible for it. You're going to have to put in some systems maybe in order to manage it. You got to do some organizational things. So you need that level of commitment. You also have to know where you're at. Where are you starting from? How are we going to know if we've made progress? So we've got to establish that baseline. And how we do that with an energy audit is we go back and look at those utility bills over the last couple of years, see where you're at. Where is that? What kind of equipment do you have? How old is your equipment? What kind of energy does that equipment operate? All of those things are really important. We need to determine who our partners and our stakeholders are. Of course, our energy providers are going to be a partner and a stakeholder. If we are, and I know I've worked with other industries that we actually work with next door neighbors to work with things, and those supply chain peoples, maybe those are additional partners and stakeholders that we have. Our own employees are stakeholders because we may change policies that they're going to change how they operate or change what kinds of things that they do, or maybe even change work hours, depending on how you're dealing with that. We have to have an organization. We're going to establish a monitoring plan. What are we going to track on a monthly, quarterly basis to see if we're making progress? Which means we're going to have to do some reporting out. We'll have to evaluate, did we make progress? And then we optimize. And as we optimize, we go back into our new baseline and the cycle starts again. And so these are going to be those elements of the plan that need to be put in place to really work with what you've got happening. So how is that all going to pan out and play? And we know that ultimately we want energy savings. We want energy efficiency. We want to be more sustainable. We want to be cleaner, and we want to have the resources to work with what we're doing. So these elements of this plan are really helping us drive to be able to deal with our efficiencies. So really what we're after are those real solutions. And those real solutions could be changing out from boilers for water heaters to some of the on-demand water heaters. It looks at different monitoring systems. Maybe we're upgrading and putting in additional systems. Maybe we're putting in additional monitors. But what we're really looking at, and as we put together these plans, we're going to look for initially, where are the quick hits? Anytime you want to make change, you want to have early successes. You really want to have those early successes. So we might be looking at our HVAC systems. These aren't necessarily the glamorous things to look at. You know, that's one of the things that people are always talking about as we deal with the infrastructure and we're doing stuff. You know, who takes out the trash isn't necessarily the most glamorous thing out there, but how the trash gets handled and takes up does impact your business. It impacts how people see you. It impacts how people look at your reputation. All of that happens. So heating and air control in your facilities, always a big energy consumer, and there are ways to deal with that. Lighting, that's, you know, as we mentioned, looking at your lighting situations, how your lighting is. How do you monitor within a room? Is somebody going to have to flip a switch, or is it automatic? Have we got smart systems that are put in place? Smart thermostats, smart lighting systems, a lot of different smart devices now can really help do a lot of things. You can even, right now, I've done it at my house, I've actually put in smart light bulbs. So I can actually turn on and turn off my light by voice. So I don't necessarily have to get up. I don't necessarily have it controlled. I can even set it at a different level, which is huge. My light doesn't have to be totally on or totally off. So smart devices really come in. Equipment scheduling. How do you do your maintenance? Can you schedule your maintenance for off hours so that we're not necessarily having everybody all together and looking at those energy costs? How do you turn on equipment? When do you kick on your heating and air so that you're not hitting peak rates? How do you look at your air exchanges? Are there ways to deal with those air exchanges? You're looking at how you're dealing with other systems. Do you need real-time monitoring? Is it going to help for your situation? Can you do automated reporting and compliance? Do you need to bring in a consultant that can say, look, energy management system? Do you want to put in an energy management system? Would that be helpful to you? Your predictive maintenance. By monitoring things, you know when you can go in and do predictive maintenance, and now maybe you do that predictive maintenance in off-peak times so that you've got your equipment is ready to go for when you need it for a higher energy use, or you're not swinging equipment back and forth. That's one of the real challenges that we have in science buildings is if the HVAC system is swinging, you're always trying to get your air exchanges and things like that, and it's hard on your equipment. Is there a baseline level that we want to look at? So we're really going to be looking at those pieces, those real-time solutions. Maybe you work with your providers to optimize how you structure the contracts that you structure for your energy use. This was always a big thing when I was working with the refineries, is that you ended up having to make sure you're coordinated with your electricity provider, you're coordinated with your other suppliers so that you've got the energy when you need it and you have it there. So those are big things that are looking at. Demand response systems. Those are also good things to have. So those are the areas that we're going to dive into as we start expanding out our energy implementation and looking at how to build these plans and looking at those next steps, those deeper dives into where we're at. But I do want to point out a couple of things. One is that there are people here to help you. The Department of Energy does have ways to deal with technical assistance. Our group, this Great Plains Center of Excellence, and our industrial assessment centers can provide you with that information. Overall, if we make our companies more efficient, it's going to drive profitability, which will allow for job creation. It'll allow for a lot of different things that are in there. There are things that we can help with, like our energy audits or assessments. We can put people in contact with the Better Buildings initiatives, the small business ones, the Office of State and Community Energy Programs. We can help with facilitating with some of the REAP grants. Those are grants that are minimizing energy use that help folks get those more energy efficient items, help you get equipment upgrades. We can put folks into those types of areas. So you don't have to, that's the beauty of all of this, is you don't have to go it alone. There are people that are there to help, people that are willing to help. So I'll open it up. That's all I wanted to cover today. I'll open it up for questions and any discussion if anybody wants to chime in with some ideas there. But while we're doing that, I would love for you to go ahead and fill out the webinar evaluation. This is the QR code for that evaluation. It'll take you to a Google form, and it's just a real quick, I think it's only 4 questions, so that you could do that, or you had the link in the Zoom invite today. So I'll open it up for questions and discussion.